Good morning, America. How are you? Monday morning rail. We'll be 500 miles before the day is done. They call me the City of New Orleans. Hi, I'm Denny Jelsma, and I'm at the world-famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida. And today is Monday, and you know what we always do on Monday? You guessed it, we do show and tell. And show and tell is brought to you every week by Jelsma Graphics, the people that do the railroad embroidery since 1985, almost 40 years. And you want any embroidered railroad clothing? Just go to jelsma.com, that's JELSMA.com, and you'll see the large selection of railroad clothing. With all that being said, show and tell starts right now. Well, show and tell starts right now. It's Monday morning, and we're at the world-famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum club layout. And Monday mornings is always a very exciting time at the club here because the guys bring in their new items or the items that they like to, show off and talk about all the new things that they may have acquired. But today I want to talk about, I think, is a very exciting train, and it is the train that started probably one of the most popular trains in America. And that train was the California Zephyr, but there was a train before that that inspired the California Zephyr, and that train was called the Exposition Flyer, and it ran from Chicago to San Francisco. And it was basically, first it was started, San Francisco had an exposition, and this train ran all the way from 1945 up to the day that the California Zephyr started. And the Exposition Flyer was kind of an experimental train, if you want to say, and it was really the brainchild of the president of the Burlington Railroad, and his name was Bud, no relation to the Bud manufacturing out of Philadelphia. But the CB&Q, you've heard in different videos I talked about Vista Domes, but they made the first streamline Vista Dome, and 1945 at the Aurora, Illinois shop right outside of Chicago. And they ran this dome on the Exposition Flyer. And what I have here today is a model of the Exposition Flyer. Now, typically this train was 10 to 14 cars long. In the summertime, it really swirled. And the thing that made this train so popular was this car right here, and it's called the first dome, the Silver Dome. And this car was the home shopped in Aurora, Illinois. It was a Bud car, and they made a dome out of it. And this was the car that inspired the California Zephyr. And so 3 railroads got involved: the Denver, Rio Grande, the Chicago Burlington and Quincy, and the Western Pacific. And the model that I have here is kind of a short version of the Exposition Flyer. And so it had sleeping cars, that had a few coaches, and it was really the prelude runner before the California Zephyr. And it was so successful that the 3 railroads got together and they ordered the California Zephyr. And when the California Zephyr was inaugurated, the Exposition Flyer was actually dropped. And so when you think of the Exposition Flyer, you don't really equate it with the California Zephyr, but this is the train that really set off. And it was so popular that when Burlington added the other dome that they made 2 or 3 years later, the train was just constantly sold out. And people wanted to ride in this new thing called the Vista Dome. And so it really started off, the California Zephyr was a very unique train along with the Exposition Flyer, because America really didn't have a famous tourist train. And really the California Zephyr was a tourist train. It was heavily populated in the summertime. In the wintertime, you saw it many times with 7 to 8 cars. The typical Cal Zephyr was 11 cars, and in the summertime it would swell up to 13 to 14. But that train was designed for the tourist and for the average tourist. You know, you go back and a little bit of railroad history. In the Gilded Age, only the very wealthy could ride in the Pullman cars. And then in the 20s, the Pullman added the 14-1, 12-1 types sleeping cars that had the two seats back facing each other, and they had a curtain that could make it in, and it was very affordable. And for the first time, the average person, the working Joe, could take his family on a train trip. Well, then the Depression hit, and once again, only the businessman and really the upper class could really ride on the trains. And it wasn't until after the World War II that the average person could take vacations. And it was boom time after the war, so from 1945 really up to 1960 was the heyday for the average person riding the train. And I remember growing up in the cornfields of Iowa, my dad would take me to the train stations all over Iowa, and we would watch these fabulous, beautiful trains come in on the Burlington, the Milwaukee, the Rock Island, the Illinois Central, the Chicago Northwestern. All of these trains crossed Iowa to go to the west. And it was just a beautiful time to grow up and watch these trains. And today, when you look at what is offered in our passenger trains, it's really kind of sad. One of the first things the railroad did was eliminate the feeder trains. And today Amtrak has no feeder trains. It just doesn't really make sense. And they make it very difficult for the traveling public to even ride their trains. Well, back in the heyday of the passenger trains, the railroads did everything you could imagine to lure you on their trains. And the first really popular train that brought in tourists was the Exposition Flyer, and with the experimental dome, and the rest is history. A lot of railroads had dome cars to lure the average person on their train. And that's the way it is at Show and Tell at the world famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida, where the sun always shines and running trains is an absolute pleasure, and peace and harmony and in climate controlled comfort.